My name is Claire Bennett. I'm an artist, a single mother, and a woman who was once loved so deeply. Someone gave me his heart, literally. I lived with a failing heart, raised two daughters on my own, and no one knew who their father was. I thought I'd die before they ever started kindergarten. And then, he came back. Not the one who left me, but the one who had loved me quietly all along and saved me with the ultimate sacrifice. My life has been a series of losses, of things shattered beyond repair. Until love taught me this. Sometimes the most beautiful things are built from what's been broken. Before I share my story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe if you've ever fought through pain for the people you love. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The first time I saw Eli Montgomery, he was arguing with a volunteer about the proper way to tag sea turtles. His designer shoes were sinking into the wet sand, his pressed shirt already wilting in the Miami humidity, and his face wore the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else but at a charity beach cleanup. "You're doing it wrong," I said, not bothering to look up from the turtle nest I was documenting. "The tags go on the rear flipper, not the front." He turned to me, those unusual violet eyes narrowing. "And you are?" "Claire Bennett, the person who actually knows what she's doing." I stood, brushing sand from my paint-stained shorts. "You must be the corporate sponsor they warned us about." That's how we started, with barbs and rolled eyes, him in his three-piece suit trying to fulfill some PR obligation, me in my usual chaos of paint-splattered clothes and wild hair that never quite stayed in its bun. By the end of that first day, though, something had shifted. Maybe it was when he stayed 3 hours past his scheduled appearance to help release the last of the rehabilitated turtles. Maybe it was when I caught him smiling, really smiling, as a turtle named Herbert made its determined waddle toward the waves. "You're not what I expected," he admitted later, as we sat by the bonfire the volunteers had built. The Charleston accent softened his words just enough to make them sound like a confession. "Rich boy with a conscience?" I teased, but gently. "Yeah, you're not what I expected either." We talked until the fire died to embers. He told me about the pressure of running his family's energy empire, how he'd pushed for the company to go green against his board's wishes. I told him about my students, kids with disabilities who found their voices through art, about the tiny apartment I shared with too many canvases and a cat named Basil. "Show me," he said suddenly. "Your art." I want to see it." Nobody had ever asked with such genuine interest. So I did something I never did. I invited him back to my cluttered studio. He stood in front of my paintings for so long I started to fidget, wondering if he was trying to find a polite way to leave. "This one," he finally said, pointing to a canvas of children building sandcastles against a storm-dark sky. "It's hope and fear at the same time. He paused, searching for words. "It's honest." That night, he kissed me in my doorway, tasting of bonfire smoke and possibility. The next 6 months were stolen moments and secret meetings. Eli would fly down to Miami whenever he could escape Charleston, showing up at my door with takeout from whatever restaurant had caught his eye and stories about boardroom battles that sounded like another world. We'd eat cross-legged on my paint-stained floor, planning a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. "Blue," I said one night, tracing patterns on his chest as we lay tangled in my sheets. "Our house will be blue, right by the water, with a studio where I can see the sunrise. And solar panels," he added, kissing my forehead. "State-of-the-art ones. We'll be completely off-grid. 2 bedrooms, maybe 3. I could feel his heartbeat quicken under my palm. 3, he agreed. Definitely 3. We were building castles in the air, but they felt real when he held me. Real when he showed up at my school's art show, mingling with my students' parents like he belonged there. Real when he started leaving clothes in my closet and a toothbrush by my sink. The cracks showed up slowly, like hairline fractures in glass. Missed calls became more frequent. His trips to Miami grew shorter, the shadows under his eyes deeper. "Talk to me," I begged one evening after he'd spent our entire dinner staring at his phone. "What's happening?" "Family stuff," he said, which had become his standard non-answer. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it. That's what we do, right?" Face things together? He pulled me close then, holding me like I might evaporate. I'm trying, Claire. God, I'm trying. The last time I saw him, he made love to me like he was memorizing every inch of my skin. I should have known. Should have recognized goodbye in the way he held my face, in the way he whispered my name like a prayer. I woke to an empty bed and a letter on his pillow. Claire, I'm not brave enough. I thought I was, but I'm not. They need me to be someone else, and I can't fight them anymore. You deserve someone who can give you that blue house without conditions, without complications. Please don't look for me. Please just be happy. All my love, Eli. I read it 17 times before I threw up. Then I threw it in the trash. Then I dug it out and read it again, searching for something I'd missed, some clue that would make this make sense. There wasn't one. The positive pregnancy test mocked me from the bathroom counter. 2 pink lines, clear as day. I'd taken 3 more, just to be sure, and they all said the same thing. Pregnant. I sat on my bathroom floor for 2 hours, Basil purring against my leg, trying to make sense of a world that had tilted off its axis. Part of me wanted to call him, to scream or cry or beg, but my pride, or maybe it was self-preservation, kept my phone in my pocket. He made his choice, I told myself. This is mine. The ultrasound tech's eyes widened at my 8-week appointment. Well, she said, turning the screen toward me, looks like you're having twins. 2 heartbeats thundered through the speakers. 2 tiny shapes on the screen. Already perfect. Already mine. I laughed and sobbed at the same time, probably looking deranged. Is the father? The tech began gently. Not in the picture, I said firmly. It's just us. And it was. Through the morning sickness that lasted all day, through the exhaustion that made painting feel impossible, through the nights I cried into my pillow, it was just us. I painted when I could, taught my classes until I couldn't hide my growing belly anymore, and pretended my heart wasn't shattered into 1,000 pieces. The girls came early. Of course they did. 34 weeks, in the middle of a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half of Miami. Nova arrived first, screaming her displeasure at the world. Celine followed 4 minutes later, quiet and watchful. Both had their father's violet eyes. Unusual, the nurse commented. That color, genetic? Their father's, I whispered, touching Nova's tiny fist. The only thing he left them. That wasn't entirely true. They also got his stubborn streak, his perfectionist tendencies, and his smile. The real one, not the one he wore for cameras. The cardiomyopathy diagnosis came 3 weeks later. Postpartum, the doctor explained, though rare. My heart, already broken metaphorically, was literally failing. With proper management, she said carefully, you could have many years, but you'll need to be careful. No excessive physical strain, regular monitoring, and absolutely no more pregnancies. I looked at my daughters, sleeping peacefully in their shared hospital bassinet, and made a decision. I would live. Not just survive, but live. For them. 5 years. That's how long I managed to keep Eli Montgomery in a locked box in my mind, only taking him out in the darkest hours when the girls were asleep and I could afford to fall apart. 5 years of birthday parties without him, of first words and first steps and first days of school. 5 years of being both mother and father, of answered questions about why they didn't have a daddy like other kids. Some families are different, I'd tell them, but different doesn't mean less than. Nova would nod solemnly, already protective of her quieter sister. Celine would just curl into my side, satisfied with any answer that came with cuddles. We'd built a life, the 3 of us. Small but solid. My art had found an audience, other single mothers, mostly, who saw their own struggles in my paintings of women holding their children against storms, of tiny hands creating beauty from broken things. It wasn't the career I dreamed of, but it paid the bills and let me work from home. The invitation came on a Tuesday. Heavy cream cardstock with embossed letters. The Charleston Museum of Energy Innovation cordially invites you to participate in Sustainable Futures, an Artist's Vision. I almost threw it away. Charleston meant Eli, and I'd worked too hard to build walls around that pain. But the commission they were offering, it would cover 6 months of rent. 6 months of not worrying about every penny. Miami's too far, Julian said when I told him. My best friend since the girls were born, the one who'd driven me to the hospital that stormy night, who'd held my hand through diagnoses and doubts. What if something happens? Nothing will happen, I assured him, though my traitorous heart was already racing at the thought. It's just 3 days, in and out. He probably won't even be there. Julian's dark eyes were skeptical. He'd never pushed, never asked why I'd shut down every time he'd tried to shift our friendship toward something more. But he knew. Somehow, he always knew. Take your medication, he said finally. Call me if you need anything. So I packed up my paintings, dressed my girls in their best dresses, and drove toward the city I'd sworn I'd never visit. Nova chattered the entire way, excited about the adventure. Celine quietly drew in her sketchbook, already her mother's daughter. Will there be a beach? Nova asked as Charleston's skyline appeared. You always paint beaches. Maybe, I said, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. We'll see. The museum was exactly what I'd expected. All glass and sustainable materials, a monument to progressive wealth. I was setting up my display when I heard it. That laugh, rich and genuine, the one I'd heard so rarely. My hands stilled on the canvas I was hanging. Mommy? Celine tugged on my dress. You okay? I looked down at my daughter, at Eli's daughter, and forced a smile. Just tired, baby. Why don't you and Nova go look at the fountain outside? Stay where I can see you. They ran off, and I turned back to my work, pretending my hands weren't shaking. I could do this. 3 days. I could survive 3 days. I should have known he'd find us through the art. I was in the museum cafe, watching the girls eat overpriced sandwiches, when I saw him stop in front of my largest piece. It was one I'd painted last year. 2 children on a white beach, building castles while storm clouds gathered. Their faces were turned away, but their hair, Nova's wild curls and Celine's straight silk, both dark with hints of auburn in the sunlight. He stood there for so long that other visitors started flowing around him like water around a stone. I watched him lean closer, saw the moment his body went rigid. He knew. Somehow he knew. Mommy, I need the bathroom, Nova announced at maximum volume. His head whipped around at the word, and our eyes met across the space. 5 years collapsed into nothing. He looked older, thinner, the laugh lines deeper, but the shadows darker. Those violet eyes widened as they took me in, then dropped to the girls beside me. I saw him do the math, saw the recognition slam into him like a physical blow when Nova turned her face toward him. His eyes in a smaller face, his stubborn chin, his smile. Now, Mommy, Nova insisted. Okay, baby. I stood on unsteady legs, gathering our things. Let's go. But he was already moving, crossing the space in long strides. Claire. My name on his lips was a key turning in a lock I'd thought was rusted shut. I couldn't run, not with the girls here, not without causing a scene. Eli. I kept my voice level, professional. I didn't expect to see you here. I sponsor the museum. He stopped, his gaze dropping to the girls again. Celine had moved behind me, shy as always with strangers. But Nova stepped forward, curious and fearless. Are you the man from Mommy's pictures? She asked. The blood drained from his face. What? She keeps them in a box under her bed. I'm not supposed to know, but I'm good at finding things. Nova smiled proudly. I'm Nova. This is Celine. She doesn't talk to strangers. Nova, that's enough. I picked up Celine, who buried her face in my neck. We need to go. How old are they? His voice was raw. 5. I met his eyes, letting him see the truth there. They're 5. Claire, no. I cut him off. You don't get to do this. Not here, not now. Are they? He swallowed hard. They're mine, aren't they? Nova, who'd been following our exchange with interest, piped up. We don't have a daddy. Mommy says some families are different. I watched him flinch like she'd slapped him. Good. Let him hurt. Let him feel a fraction of what we'd felt. We're leaving. I took Nova's hand. Say goodbye to the nice man. Bye. Nova waved cheerfully. Celine peeked out from my shoulder, her violet eyes, his eyes, studying him solemnly. I made it 3 steps before his voice stopped me. I have rights. I turned back slowly. You have nothing. You gave up everything the night you left a letter on your pillow instead of fighting for us. I didn't know. And whose fault is that? We stared at each other across 5 years of silence. Then Celine, my quiet one, reached out a small hand toward him. Not to touch, just reaching, like she recognized something in him that called to something in her. He made a sound like breaking. I turned and walked away. The certified letter arrived a week after we returned to Miami. Legal letterhead, formal language, but the message was clear. Eli. Eli wanted a paternity test. He can't do this, I raged to Julian over wine that evening. The girls were asleep and I was falling apart in my kitchen. He can't just walk away and then demand. He can, actually. Julian's voice was gentle but honest. Florida law gives him rights if he can prove paternity. Even after 5 years? Even after 5 years. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to pack up my girls and run somewhere he'd never find us. Instead, I drank my wine and planned for war. The test was done at a sterile lab in downtown Miami. Eli flew down for it, looking like he hadn't slept since Charleston. I didn't speak to him beyond what was necessary. Nova, of course, chattered through the entire appointment, telling the nurse about her drawings and her best friend at school and how Celine could already read chapter books. "Your daughters are delightful," the nurse said to Eli, who looked like he'd been punched. "They're not," I started, then stopped. Because they were, weren't they? His daughters? Had been since the moment they were conceived, whether he'd known it or not. The results came back exactly as expected. 99.9% probability of paternity. I stared at the paper until the numbers blurred. Julian held me while I cried that night, solid and steady as always. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." I thought of Nova's curiosity, Celine's quiet yearning. I honestly don't know. Eli's next move surprised me. Instead of lawyers and custody demands, I got a simple text. "Can we talk, please?" We met at a neutral location, a park halfway between Miami and Charleston. He looked worse than before, hollow-eyed and exhausted. "I hired a private investigator," he said without preamble. "I know about the heart condition. I know about the hospital stays. I know you've been doing this alone. Your point?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "My parents knew about you. They intercepted your calls, had you watched. They knew you were pregnant." The world tilted. "What?" "They told me you'd moved on. Married someone else. Said you wanted no contact." His laugh was bitter. "And I was weak enough to believe them because it was easier than fighting. You left before I even knew I was pregnant. They threatened to destroy you." He looked up, eyes haunted. "Your career, your school's funding, everything. I thought leaving would protect you." "Don't." I stood abruptly. "Don't you dare make yourself the hero of this story. You left. Whatever your reasons, you left." "I know." He stood too, maintaining distance. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to know them. To be something to them, whatever you'll allow." I thought of Celine reaching toward him in the museum, of Nova asking why some kids had daddies and she didn't, of all the nights I'd wished for someone else to hold them when they were sick, to celebrate their victories, to share the beautiful burden of raising them. "Supervised visits," I heard myself say. "Once a month, here in Miami." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Thank you." "I'm not doing it for you." I turned to leave, then paused. "They like pancakes, Saturday mornings, and Nova's afraid of dogs but won't admit it. Celine needs quiet time after school or she gets overwhelmed. They both sleep with stuffed elephants named Mr. Peanuts and Professor Trunk." I walked away before I could see his reaction, before I could remember why I'd loved him enough to let him destroy me. The first visit was a disaster. Eli showed up with enough toys to stock a store, clearly having panicked and bought everything in the 5-year-old girl section. Nova was delighted. Celine hid behind my leg for the first hour. "You don't have to buy their love," I told him quietly, while Nova showed him every single one of her drawings. "I don't know what else to do," he admitted. "I read parenting books on the flight. None of them covered this." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Just be yourself, the real you, not the Montgomery Air version." So he did. He sat on my living room floor and let Nova paint his nails electric blue. He read to Celine in quiet voices until she finally crept close enough to see the pictures. He learned their rhythms. Nova's need for constant activity, Celine's careful observation before engagement. By the third visit, Celine was letting him braid her hair. By the 5th, they were both calling him Mr. Eli and counting days until his next visit. "Can he come to my birthday?" Nova asked one evening as I tucked them in. Their 6th birthday was approaching fast. "I don't think— Please, Mommy." Celine's soft voice surprised me. She rarely asked for anything. "He said he'd teach me to play chess." I looked at my quiet daughter, the one who watched everything and said little, who'd been reaching toward her father since the moment she saw him. "I'll think about it." The birthday party decision was taken out of my hands when Nova collapsed at school the week before. One moment, she was running on the playground, the next she was on the ground, lips tinged blue, gasping for air. The teacher called 911. Then she called me. By the time I reached the hospital, they had her on oxygen and were running tests. "Congenital heart defect," the pediatric cardiologist explained. "Mild, we think. It's probably been there since birth, but only showing symptoms now. We'll need more tests." I called Eli without thinking, my hands shaking too hard to text. He answered on the first ring. "Nova's in the hospital. She collapsed. They think—" I couldn't finish. "I'm on my way." He made the 5-hour drive in 3. I didn't ask how. He burst through the hospital doors looking wild, still in his board meeting suit. "Where is she?" "Sleeping." I was sitting in the hallway, Celine curled in my lap. "They're monitoring her overnight." He slumped against the wall. "Can I see her?" I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries. Instead, I led him to her room, where she lay tiny in the hospital bed, dark hair spread across the pillow, monitors beeping steadily. "She's okay," I whispered. "She's going to be okay." He reached for her hand, then stopped. "Can I?" I nodded. He took her small hand in his larger one carefully, like she might break. "Hey, Star Girl," he whispered. "You scared us." Nova's eyes fluttered open. "Mr. Eli?" Her voice was hoarse. "Did you come for my birthday?" "I came for you." His voice cracked. "Always for you." She smiled and drifted back to sleep, but kept hold of his hand. We sat there through the night, not talking, just watching our daughter breathe. Celine eventually crawled into his lap, and he held her like he'd been doing it all her life. As dawn broke through the hospital windows, I made a decision. "You can come to their birthday party," I said quietly, as their father, not as Mr. Eli. He looked at me over Celine's sleeping head, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Are you sure?" "No." I was too tired to lie. "But they need you, and maybe that's enough for now." The truth about Eli's father came out the way all family secrets do, messily and at the worst possible time. We were at the girls' birthday party, the backyard full of school friends and chaos, when Mrs. Montgomery arrived uninvited. I'd never met her in person, this woman who'd helped steal 5 years from us. She was exactly what I'd pictured. Pearls, perfect posture, and an expression like she'd smelled something unpleasant. "Elijah," she said, ignoring me entirely, "we need to discuss your recent decisions." "Not here, Mother." He shifted to block her view of the party. "Not today. The board is concerned about your distractions." Nova chose that moment to run up, frosting in her hair and gap-toothed grin wide. "Daddy, come see our cake. Mommy made it look like a beach." Mrs. Montgomery's gaze sharpened on my daughter, on her daughter's granddaughter. "So it's true? You're actually claiming them." "Go inside, Nova," I said quietly. She went, for once sensing adult tension. "They're my daughters," Eli said, steel in his voice I'd never heard before. "My family." "Your family," she laughed, cold and bitter, "is built on lies anyway, just like these children." "What's that supposed to mean?" She turned those calculating eyes on me. "Did he tell you about his real father? The starving artist who got me pregnant and then conveniently died before he could ruin my prospects." The party noise faded to white static. Eli went very, very still. "Richard Montgomery couldn't have children," she continued, each word a precisely aimed arrow, "but he needed an heir, and I needed security. So we made a deal. A business arrangement that worked for 40 years until you decided to throw it all away for—" She gestured at me, at the happy chaos of the party. "This. Get out." Eli's voice was deadly quiet. "Get out and don't come back." She left, but the damage was done. The truth hung between us like a third presence as we mechanically got through the rest of the party. That night, after the guests were gone and the girls were asleep, we sat on my back steps. "I'm like them," he said finally. "A father I never knew. A mother who lied. A whole life built on pretense. You're nothing like that. The words came without thought. You came back. You're trying. I left you alone. Pregnant. Sick. He buried his face in his hands. I'm exactly like him. The man who left my mother to handle everything alone. Your father died. You made a choice. I should have been angrier, but I was too tired. There's a difference. Is there, when the result is the same? I thought about Julian. Steady, faithful Julian, who'd held my hair when morning sickness hit and driven me to every appointment. Who loved me in a way that asked for nothing in return. Who was probably a better choice in every logical way. But love wasn't logical. The result isn't the same, I said quietly. You're here now. The diagnosis hit during what should have been a perfect day. Eli had been part of our lives for 6 months, slowly earning trust and building relationships. We'd found a rhythm, him flying down every weekend, staying at a nearby hotel but spending days with us. The girls bloomed under his attention, and even I had to admit the help was nice. We were at the beach, building sandcastles like we'd dreamed about years ago, when the chest pain started. Sharp, breathless, wrong. I tried to hide it, but Eli knew my tells now. Hospital, he said, already scooping up Celine. Now, I'm fine. You're gray. He was already moving, Nova running to keep up. You're going! The cardiologist's face told me everything before she spoke. The damage is progressing faster than we'd hoped. We need to discuss transplant options. The girls were in this waiting room with Eli, probably charming the nurses. I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to process a world where I might not see them grow up. How long? My voice sounded foreign. Without a transplant? 2 years? Maybe less if you have another cardiac event. 2 years. Nova would be 8. Celine would still be afraid of the dark. They'd remember me, but barely. Eli drove us home in silence, the girls asleep in the back. He helped carry them inside, tucked them in with practiced ease. Then he found me on the kitchen floor, where I'd finally let myself fall apart. We'll fix this, he said, pulling me against him. Best doctors, best hospitals. Money's no object. Money can't buy organs. I laughed bitterly against his chest. Trust me, I've researched. Then we wait. We get you on every list. We plan for the worst. I pulled back to look at him. I need to know they'll be okay. If something happens, I need to know you'll take them. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me. I gripped his shirt. Promise me you'll take care of them. With my life, he said fiercely. But you're going to be fine. You're going to be here. I wanted to believe him, but I'd learned not to trust him forever. Eli sold his company shares. I found out from Julian, who'd heard from a mutual friend in Charleston's financial sector. He did what? I stared at Julian across my kitchen table. Liquidated everything. Set up some kind of research foundation instead. Julian's expression was carefully neutral. Word is his family's furious. I confronted Eli that weekend. You sold the company? He shrugged, helping Nova with her homework. It was time for a change. Eli, I missed 6 years of their lives for that company. He looked up at me. I won't miss any more. He moved to Miami the next week. Bought a house 10 minutes from ours. Nothing fancy. Just a regular home in a regular neighborhood, with a room for each girl and a garden he immediately destroyed trying to plant vegetables. You're terrible at this, I laughed, finding him glaring at wilted tomato plants. YouTube lied to me. But he was smiling, dirt under his nails, looking more like himself than he had in years. The girls adapted with the resilience of children. Daddy's house and Mommy's house, though they spent most nights with me. Eli learned to cook. Badly. He joined the PTA enduring the gossip with grace. He became just another single parent juggling schedules and homework and bedtime battles. You don't have to do this, I told him one evening. We were at his house, the girls asleep upstairs after a movie night. The normal life thing, it's not you. Maybe it wasn't. He handed me a cup of tea, chamomile, good for my heart. But it is now. We existed in careful orbit around each other. Co-parents, friends, maybe. Ignoring the pull that still existed between us, the way my heart raced, dangerously, when he smiled, the way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, Julian watched it all with knowing eyes. He's in love with you, he said one day, apropos of nothing. Julian, and you're in love with him. Still, again, whatever. I didn't deny it. Couldn't, really. It doesn't matter. The girls matter. Staying alive matters. You know what? He stood, suddenly angry. You're so focused on dying that you're forgetting to live. He left, and I sat with his words echoing in my empty house. Was I forgetting to live? Or was I just too scared to try? The call came at 3 a.m. Unknown number, but something made me answer. Is this Claire Bennett? The voice was professional, clinical. This is Miami General. You're listed as Julian Reeves' emergency contact. The world stopped. What happened? Car accident. He's in surgery. You should come. I called Eli without thinking. I couldn't finish. Julian, I'll be right there. He took the girls to his house, still in their pajamas, while I raced to the hospital. The waiting room was a blur of harsh lights and bitter coffee. Julian's parents arrived from Puerto Rico. His sister flew in from New York. We sat in horrible silence, waiting. 8 hours. 8 hours of surgery while they tried to repair damage that shouldn't have been survivable. He'd swerved to avoid a drunk driver, hit a concrete barrier at 60 miles per hour. His car crumpled like paper. He's stable, the surgeon finally said. But there was significant trauma. We won't know the full extent until he wakes up. If he wakes up, I heard in the silence. I lived at the hospital for 3 days. Eli brought the girls to visit, managed schedules, kept life moving while I sat beside my best friend's bed and begged him to wake up. You can't leave, I whispered, holding his still hand. You're the one who's supposed to be here, the stable one, the one who stays. On the 4th day, his fingers twitched in mine. Julian, I leaned forward. Can you hear me? His eyes opened slowly, focused with difficulty. Claire? I'm here. Tears streaming. I'm right here. Need to... He struggled, words slurring. Tell you... Shh, rest. Everything else can wait. But he fought, urgent despite the medication. Donor card. Updated it. Promise. What? Julian, stop. You're going to be fine. Promise. His grip tightened weakly. If something happens, want it to be you. Nothing's going to happen. But cold dread was creeping up my spine. Julian, love you, he whispered. Always have. Want to save you. He drifted back into unconsciousness, leaving me reeling. The next day, a scan revealed what the doctors had missed. A brain bleed, slow but unstoppable, inoperable. Julian died on a Tuesday morning, as quietly as he'd lived. His last conscious act had been to ensure his heart, his beautiful, generous heart, would go to me. We can't, I told his parents. I can't take... He wanted this, his mother said through tears. He spoke to us months ago. Said if anything happened... She took my hands. He said you had daughters who needed their mother. That was all that mattered. I collapsed. Eli caught me, held me while I screamed and raged against the horrible, perfect gift of a love I'd never deserved. Julian's heart beat in my chest 2 weeks later. Strong and steady and sacrifice made flesh. At his funeral, I stood with a bandaged chest and spoke about the man who'd loved me enough to ensure I'd live, even if he couldn't. Recovery was its own kind of hell, not the physical part. That was just pain and medication and careful movements. The emotional part was what nearly killed me. Survivor's guilt sat on my chest heavier than the surgical scars. It's not your fault, Eli said for the 100th time. We were sitting in my backyard while the girls played, 3 months post-surgery. He made a choice to save his family. That's how he saw you. All of you. He watched Nova push Celine on the swing. I understand it. If it had been me... Don't. I couldn't bear the thought. Just don't. But the truth was, Julian's heart was changing everything. For the first time in years, I could run with my daughters, lift them without gasping, plan beyond the next cardiac event. The future, which had been measured in months, suddenly stretched into decades. I want to paint it, I said one day, surprising myself. All of it. The fear and the gift and the horrible, beautiful mess of it. So paint it, Eli said simply. I did. Canvases filled with storm clouds breaking, with hearts made of light and shadow, with roots that grew from broken ground. The museum that had brought us back together offered me a solo show. Borrowed time, I called it. Opening night, I stood in a room full of strangers looking at my pain transformed into art. The girls wore matching dresses and played tag between the sculptures. Eli handled the business side I'd never mastered, charming collectors and critics with equal ease. "You did it," he said, finding me hiding by the emergency exit. "You took the worst thing and made it beautiful." Julian made it beautiful. I gestured helplessly. Survived it. No. He stepped closer, and I didn't step back. You honored it. That's different. We were close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his violet eyes, the silver starting at his temples. 5 years of distance collapsed again, but this time I didn't run. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of what?" "Of wanting this, of hoping, of building something just to watch it fall apart again." He cupped my face gently, thumbs tracing my cheekbones. "What if it doesn't fall apart? What if we learned from last time? What if we didn't? What if we're the same people who—" He kissed me. Soft, careful. A question more than a statement. I answered by not pulling away, by letting myself want something beyond survival for the first time in years. "Mommy's kissing Daddy!" Nova's delighted shriek broke us apart. The entire gallery turned to look. "Well," Eli said, ears red but smiling, "that's one way to make it public." Celine tugged on my dress. "Does this mean we can all live in one house now?" I looked at Eli, at our daughters, at the paintings that told our broken, beautiful story. "Maybe," I said. "We'll see." 1 year later, I stood in front of a blue house by the water. Not grand, not perfect, but ours. Solar panels glinted on the roof. A studio with east-facing windows caught the morning light. 3 bedrooms, just like we'd dreamed. "Second thoughts?" Eli asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "No," I leaned into him, "just thinking about time." 7 years since that first meeting on the beach. 6 since he left. 5 raising our girls alone. 2 years since they found each other. 1 year with Julian's heart beating in my chest. 6 months since a quiet courthouse wedding with just the girls as witnesses. Time measured in heartbeats, broken ones, borrowed ones, brave ones. "Mommy! Daddy! Come see!" Nova's voice carried from the beach. "We're building the biggest castle ever!" We walked hand in hand to where our daughters worked in the sand. Celine, tongue out in concentration, carefully shaped towers. Nova, chaotic as always, dug moats with wild abandon. "It needs to be stronger here," Celine said, "or the waves will knock it down." "That's okay," Nova replied. "We'll just build it again." I thought of Julian, whose last gift meant I'd see 1,000 sand castles built and rebuilt. Of Eli, who'd found his way back against all odds. Of myself, who'd learned that broken didn't mean worthless. "Help us?" Celine asked, holding out a small shovel. We knelt in the sand, 4 people building something temporary and perfect. Tomorrow the tide would wash it away, but we'd be here to build another and another for all the years Julian had given us. Later, as the sun set, I found Eli setting up an easel in my new studio. "Paint it," he said. "All of it. Stays fit. The whole story." So I did. I painted the scar across white sand where love had broken and mended, left its mark, and kept moving. I painted 4 figures against an endless sky, building castles from the pieces of what was, creating something new from what remained. The painting hangs in our living room now. Visitors always ask about the title, The Scar on White Sand. "It's about second chances," I tell them, which is true, if incomplete. It's about the marks life leaves on us, about choosing to build anyway, about hearts that break and hearts that mend and hearts that beat on borrowed time, about love that leaves and love that returns and love that stays even after it's gone. But mostly, it's about a blue house by the water, where 2 little girls with violet eyes build sandcastles, and their parents finally learned that some things are worth believing in, even after they've fallen apart. Especially then,